What's up, squad? It's Brandon from the Bantu Sun. Thank you so much for joining me today. I wanted to talk about the recent announcement from Cote d'Ivoire, also known as Ivory Coast, to expel French troops from their soil. So this is really interesting to me because I always saw Cote d'Ivoire as the jewel of France and Africa. Like, granted, it's not as large or as wealthy as the Congo, which has a lot of British ties. The French were able to move into a lot of British colonies, but the French, using their language, were able to spread through large swaths of Africa during this colonial era, especially in West Africa. But Cote d'Ivoire is not as big as the Congo, or as loyal as they say as some regions such as Gabon. But it was close. It's competent. It's capable. It's been a standout economic performer, a relative model of stability and prosperity, all things considered, in the West African region. And the fact that France were kicked out, and also Cote d'Ivoire, is a really key location. So I've been watching these countries kick out the French: Niger, Burkina Faso, and it really didn't uh, raise my eyes so much. You see the same thing going on with Mali. Because, okay, these are landlocked Sahelian African countries. Usually it's a tough neighborhood. It's a lot of instability. You got threats from terrorism. And it's not a lot of patience there. And you can understand maybe it was the right move to make or maybe not the right move to make. But I know that neighborhood, the instability, and I know that terrorism is a real threat. And I'm thinking maybe the Gulf states got in there, maybe even the Russians got in there to exercise some influence, and they kicked out the French. But Ivory Coast is on the coast, right? And it's a port city to a lot of these landlocked francophone countries because of its sea access and them being landlocked. So I started to raise eyebrows when you see a country like Senegal, which is known for recent economic advancement, when they wanted to kick the French out. And now you have Cote d'Ivoire. And as of now, the only real places where France has troops in Africa is Djibouti, and everybody has troops in Djibouti in East Africa. It's home to a host of mini bases, and then Gabon. And Gabon is known for former President Omar Bongo famous quote. Af- uh, France without Africa is like a car without fuel, but Africa without France is a car with no driver. So we understand the allegiance of the mindset of the leadership of Gabon and their allegiances and loyalty to France, probably one of the more most loyal countries in France, historically speaking. All that being considered, Ivory Coast, I think, really is a symbol because it didn't have these terror networks per se as the Sahel. It seemed like it was really no real dire strain in their relationship. Even the leader, when you have rebellious leaders such as President Thomas Sankara next door in Burkina Faso, it seems as Cote d'Ivoire was the island of stability that maybe even some of the coup plotters could have used to overthrow President Sankara. But it will always seem that Cote d'Ivoire was that oasis of stability. It was slow, steady as she goes, economically developed, more mature of the francophone countries. And when your favorite daughter rejects you, this is a serious issue. And this is why it really, really stood out to me. And I don't think it's a coincidence, especially because it's so back to back to back to back. And I think what's happening here is, I mean, the French are getting screwed over by some. Wait, they screwed themselves over first of all, right? The French. No one says, "Look at the amazing job France done with this colony or that colony." They done horribly. I once remember reading about Lee Kuan Yew, one of the great leaders of the 20th century, and how he talked about how impressed with Paris he was because it was a century plan. And it seems that ever since the rise of the Germans, the French, the only real progress they made was in the development or the investment made into Paris, because that has been the only compliment I've heard from about France since. Geopolitically, they have been absolutely horrid. They have really done a number of self sabotage, and even now, culturally speaking, as the world burns and their empire is crumbling, the population does not seem concerned with this as much as they do the status quo of the welfare state, as they say. This is the greatest advertising, one of the greatest advertisements against socialism one can think of. It's almost as if though French lost the desire to compete, sort of speak. And you will have to really look into see what is driving that. Nevertheless, you can't say, wow, I can't believe those countries are abandoning France. You're saying, oh, it's about time they abandon France. So it's highly unfortunate. And who knows in 100 years if France, if at all, will be spoken in Africa, considering France had the largest territory size, if one of the largest, if not the largest, colonial footprint in Africa, considering that in 100 years it may not even have an African country speaking French. I think that's really, really interesting. And I started to think, okay, well, who do I think is stepping into this vacuum? Because somebody's going to step into the vacuum, because the military is only one shoe. The other shoe to drop, right? Once the military is out, is the commercial aspect. Because now there are companies, those soldiers, not only did provide a form of presence and strength, but it created a operation zone for which French citizens and French companies could kind of, I don't want to say operate with impunity, but basically got first choice in many of these countries. So whether that's telecoms, engineering, construction, etc., now France, if they wanted to compete, they're going to have to compete with other countries without that advantage in Africa. And the question is, do they really have anything that they can offer significantly better? So now they're losing, which is what imperialism was all about. Now they're about to start losing markets. And the question is, who are they going to lose these markets to? Who are going to be the new engineers in these countries or the construction companies? Of course, some of these countries may pick it up themselves, but I just got a funny feeling that a foreign actor, that these countries aren't to that level of development, all of them not being so. I just got a funny feeling that of one of the foreign actors, it could be a multitude of foreign actors are going to come in and fill that void and take over the higher end development of the country and bring a lot of the investment into the country. So I was in those countries. So I just started thinking about who I think could do the job, or who I think have already started to do the job. And of course, I think about the Gulf states, but I really think they're really focused right now in the Arab League regions, outer edges from Western Sahara across the arc of North Africa to Somalia. They're heavily involved, obviously, with Libya and the Sudan in that regards, and obviously Somalia and those other countries. But I think those Gulf states are more focused on that region as opposed to sub-Saharan Africa. I don't think I think the Russians tried to get a footprint in Africa, but I think the West is hammering them. West led by America is hammering them so hard. And as I said, the fall of Syria portended a lot of issues for Russia in my mind. So I don't think Russia's going to be able to do it. You might get Turkey in there, uh, because they've been doing a lot of operations. But I really think they, like the Gulf states, are going to be primarily focused on the outer Islamic edges. They'll take wins in the interior of Africa, where they can get them. But I think they're really going to be focused on North Africa and Eastern Africa along the Indian Ocean littoral. So as I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking about these countries that are leaving France, a lot of them are from West Africa. I I harken back to Togo and Rwanda, and you know that, yeah, I pull on that thread, and as I pull on that thread, it unravels a lot of things, and you really start to see that France has been being pickpocketed in Africa for almost 200 years, starting with the 1800s with Seychelles and the Mauritius Islands off the east coast of Africa. And you look at countries such as that are in the Commonwealth, the British Commonwealth, and the British Commonwealth is built upon the common identity, right, of culture and language. So to be in a Commonwealth, there has to be an acceptance or appreciation of the English language. And I started looking at all these countries that are in British Commonwealth, and the British Commonwealth is about 56 countries, and it's going to be a couple big countries. You know, you got Australia, India, Bangladesh, Canada, a bunch of islands, and then 21 African countries. African countries make up nearly a third of the British Commonwealth. And then they have some other islands as well, but a third is going to be coming from Africa alone. And the British has more of a footprint, almost as big of a footprint in Africa now than they did when they were the colonial empire in Africa, because now they're in countries that they never really had access before. I grant you, Mozambique, which was a Portuguese colony, but as you'll see in history, when Portugal started to wane, they found shelter under Britain, and Britain was able to provide support. And this has a lot to do with Britain being the sea power and Portugal's in protecting Portugal overseas empires, etc. And Portugal being intimidated by its largest neighbors, Britain was kind of able to come in as support for Portugal. But you see that you got Mozambique, but you have countries such as Mozambique joined in 1995, Cameroon 1995. Cameroon was mostly French, Francophone. To this day, it's mostly Francophone, and then the British governed a piece of it. They took that colony from the Germans after World War I. But Cameroon's in the Commonwealth. Gabon joined the Commonwealth. Of all the loyalist countries, supposedly, Gabon joined the Commonwealth 2022. Togo joined the Commonwealth in 2022. Rwanda joined the Commonwealth. That was 2009. But you see these various countries that have joined the British Commonwealth. And so it makes me wonder if a country such as Cote d'Ivoire, also known in English Ivory Coast, found this newfound freedom. You have to wonder, are the British going to make a major play to try to onboard these countries? Because what it's really about is access to markets. In Africa, as we always say, Africa is on a population boom. So this story really jarred me. One, because it's the French acquiescence. I can't believe France is conceding so much. And I just saw that Poland is about to take over head of the EU during their transitional rotation. And you can see this neutering of Western Europe. And you can see, when I look at my old books, how they talk about a maritime versus continental philosophy. And the maritime philosophy has won out after the world wars. And you can see how it is cutting up Europe and how it's dividing it. And it's dividing it, and you can see the biggest hawk in Europe, right? One of the biggest hawks against Russia, one of the biggest supporters of the maritime unit was Poland. And Poland was always the British check on Western Europe, right? It was the invasion of Poland that kicked off World War II as far as the British were concerned. That where they said, hey, no more. So you can see that Poland aligns itself, by definition, in an antagonistic nature against France, right? Because Poland was on the inside, Britain was on the outside. So Britain always figured if there was an issue in Europe, primarily on the Rhine River, they always had Poland on the rear end that could supplement them and support them. So they supported Poland. And this is nothing new when at an earlier time they did the same thing in the 18th century for Germany when Britain were having issues with France. They used that as a flank to France. And now they're using Poland as a flank to the western regions of Europe. And they're basically cutting Europe, cutting the continental sides of France, or the Rhine River portion, that France part, away from Russia, and saying, okay, we were separating them with our guy. And that guy in the middle, nothing goes through between these two, France and Russia. Nothing goes through you two. unless it goes through Poland. And now they're trying to do the same thing. The West is doing the same thing with Ukraine. They're trying to make that the next Poland. Militarized advocate of the maritime or Western style philosophy. So I think it's really interesting because the French weren't able, or don't even seem to have any propensity, desire, or vigor to resist being pushed to the back of history. This is at one time considered one of the great states of Europe. At one time, this is the nation of the Sun King. This is the nation of Napoleon Bonaparte. It's been so many phenomenal historical eras where France was a centerpiece in European history, and to see them relegated now to not even a junior status, irrelevant status, in the most blatant way, the removal of their international presence, I think is telling of the times. And it's a new day. It is going to be a new day in the global order as we see. And the 21st century is going to be drastically different than the 20th century. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Comment below. Like, share, subscribe if you enjoy the content. Until next time, take care. Bantu up.